Hello and welcome back to the OTB channel. Have you ever fancied creating your own custom Linux distribution? Well, today's video is going to look at how you can create a Debian stable respin using the live build application that's available for Debian and a script that's been developed by a fellow YouTuber called Esnix. It's provided me with hours of endless fun over the last couple of weeks, and I thought you might be interested in it. Okay, so creating a customized Debian respin. Why would I want to do this? Well, I certainly don't want to create my own distro and put it out there for everyone to download, or at least not at this stage, basically because I'm not a developer and I don't feel that I'd be able to maintain a distro that was out there for the public. But secondly, where I've got to so far, it's not at that stage. To be honest, I wanted to create a respin for two reasons. One, I like to tinker and I wanted to see if I could. And secondly, I thought it would be great to actually have an ISO file of my Mate desktop pre-configured so that if I have to reinstall it or install it on another machine, it's all up and running really easily. So it's a hobby. It's been an interest really more than anything else. And the thing that sort of sparked this interest was when I watched a video by a fellow YouTuber called Esnix. And let me just move over to the split screen here. The video was called Building Esnix, How to Use Debian Live Build, Soup to Nuts. And what Esnix has done here is he's put together a number of different videos that he's made and combined them into a single video that goes through the whole process. Now, it was released something like 10 months ago, so it's not completely up to date as far as the script and the releases he's currently got out there is concerned, but it's a great starting point. I will include a link to this video and also a link to Esnix's YouTube channel. I would highly recommend you subscribe to him and you have a read through what he's done so far and watch some of his videos. Now, once you've had a read through Esnix's videos, it's also worth going to his SourceForge page, where he actually hosts his own custom distro, Esnix OS, and there are two projects really listed up at this page. The first is the Esnix OS distro, which includes not only an ISO file, but also a tar package with all the build scripts and directories that you would need to build Esnix OS or your own custom distro from scratch. And he also includes a script which will allow you to convert a standard Debian into Esnix OS. Now, one thing I should say at this stage is that Esnix OS is built on XFCE, so all of the scripts relate to XFCE. And if you click on the Files section on SourceForge and go to Esnix OS, you will see that as well as the ISO file, he includes a tar file. And if you download this, this will get you started building your own distro. So I downloaded the tar file, I extracted it, and I ended up with a directory called Esnix 102 in my downloads folder. And you can see in front of you it basically contains a whole range of different folders. The two most important folders to take note of are the build script, build ESNIX 102, that's included here, and the documents folder. I went to the documents folder first of all, and I read about, I opened the prepare how-to text, which describes the various stages you should do when customizing the build. It all starts by installing the Debian package of live build. So that's just the simple apt get install live build. But it then goes into more detail about collecting all the wallpapers that you want included on your custom distro, copying the XFCE4 folder in your .config folder across to the ESNIX 102 folder, and also collecting any extra scripts or deb packages that you want included. There is then a second document in this folder called Build ESNIX How-To. And essentially this talks through what his script does. And I'm not going to talk through it because I'll leave you to do that yourself. But I studied this for quite a long time, and I also went to the live build folder where he has included an HTML version of the live build manual. So let me just see if I can drag that across. No, I can't. There we go. The basics. And I spent quite a number of hours just going through this. Bottom line though, I'm not going to explain each and every stage of this, but this was my starting point, downloading ESNIX's tar file, reading his documentation, and then deciding to try and customize this to my own liking. So I'm going to go through what I did. So, okay, I did a lot of reading and trying to wrap my head around what ESNIX has done. I'm a great believer in when somebody's done the donkey work, the hard graft, which ESNIX has ultimately done, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. We should use something that works. And you can actually make no modifications whatsoever to his script or any of the folders that he includes in his download. You can just run the script and you'll get ESNIX OS. I wanted to do something a little bit different. Some of you might have seen that I created a video several weeks ago called Make Linux Your Own, and I customized my Grub splash screen. I customized my Light DM screen, and I wanted to make sure that rather than having the Plymouth boot splash, that was disabled. So I decided that I would try and customize ESNIX's script so it allowed me to essentially get a lightly customized version of Debian to my liking with my images. So let me explain what I did. So the first thing I did was I copied the ESNIX 102 folder that I'd downloaded and put it in my home directory. I then gathered up all the backgrounds and wallpaper that I wanted, and I copied them into the backgrounds folder. I've left ESNIX's wallpaper there because some of it's quite nice, but I've also copied in my wallpaper. And there are two versions of it. One is just my wallpaper. The other is called background2.jpg, which is essentially the same, but that's going to be used for the Light DM background. Okay. That's number one. I also copied over my XFCE4 directory from my .config file, along with the dconf directory and the auto start directory. I wanted auto start because I use the plank dock, and on my current configuration I had plank auto starting when I logged in, so it made sense to copy that across. I then went into the bootloaders directory and I created a 640 by 480 splash screen, exactly the same as my wallpaper. Again, it's 640 by 480, and I copied that into each of the directories. Slightly different format for the one in for the legacy bootloader. It has to be splash.xpm.gz, but basically the same thing. Okay, and the same in each of those other folders. I then created a separate directory called LightDM. I copied across my LightDM configuration file and my SlickGreeter configuration file. And then last but not least, I created another folder called default grub, and in there I copied across my etc grub file in which I disabled the Plymouth splash screen, and I also copied across my grub splash screen, grub background.tga. Okay. So I'd got all the images that I wanted. My own grub background, my own wallpaper, my own LightDM background, and the LightDM configuration files, and the grub configuration files. Right. I then went to the script. Now, there are a couple of stages with this script. This is after you've installed Live Build. The script will automatically create a build folder for you called Esnix OS 102. Once it's done that, it will then create directories within that build directory under a folder called includes.chroot. Now, if you want to make any customizations to your system, you will need to set them up here. So I knew that I wanted to include my XFCE4 file, my dconf file, and my auto start file on the new system. The best way to do this is to create an etc skel directory plus your .config directory under that, and to put it into includes.chroot. I also wanted to make some customizations to grub itself and to drop in my background. Therefore, in the includes.chroot directory, I created a boot.grub directory. I also created another directory, etc lightdm, and another directory, etc default. Now, the way to think about this is any configuration files that you have on your system, if you want those configuration files to be reflected on your custom ISO, you have to first create the skeleton directory for those custom or configuration files to go. Right. Okay. All good so far. I then moved on to copying across my wallpapers, my configuration files, and everything else that I wanted in that custom ISO into the chroot environments, into those folders that I just created. So you'll see here, if we go down, I am copying across my LightDM, everything in that LightDM directory, into the etc LightDM directory in the chroot environment. I'm copying across my etc default grub file into etc default in the root directory. I'm copying across my grub background into the boot/grub directory included in the root environment. So I create the directories in the root environment. I then copy across all the images and files that I want in the custom ISO into those directories. Now, I won't pretend for 1 minute that I figured out how to do this immediately. My first thought, as you know, I'm a user of Mate, was to create a Mate ISO. And it did build an ISO file, but I got a kernel panic when trying to boot it. So I decided to stick with XFCE and to install XFCE on my desktop and to go with that and to kind of develop it from there. And I had a couple of attempts where it was almost there but not quite. My Grub Splash was working fine initially on the live build, but it didn't seem to be passed over when I installed the system. The system still just used the default grub. My wallpaper wasn't showing up on the install system or on the live CD, and I couldn't figure out why that was. And initially, I was struggling to get Light DM working, which is what resulted in me creating a separate default grub, a separate Light DM directory, and playing about with the script until it worked for me. Bottom line is, all eventually worked, with the exception that I could not get the default wallpaper to show up either on the live system or the install system. And I couldn't figure out how to rectify this until I eventually came across a post on a particular forum, and the answer was, let me go back to the screen. The answer was to go into that XFCE4 folder that I'd copied across, to open up within that folder xfconf and xfce per channel XML, and in there you'll find an XML file called xfce4 desktop.xml. I opened that up and I found that if I changed every single entry that referred to a wallpaper in this XML file, and I'd put my wallpaper, by the way, in USR share backgrounds, if I changed it all to my OTB JPEG and then rebuilt, suddenly the wallpaper was showing up. So it was a little bit of trial and error, to be honest. And I know this is a complex script, but essentially it consists of a number of simple stages: install, live build, create a directory for your live build that contains the includes.shroot directory, mirror in your includes.shroot directory anything that you want to end up in your final build, including the directory structure, copy across your customized files and configurations into those directories that you've just created, and then do the build. So that was my basic changes made to the script. I then copied the script over into my home directory. I opened it up again, and I know I'd already sorted out making the folders in the ch root environment and copying the relevant files over to that environment. But there's two other important parts. Right at the beginning, the script is going to set up a build environment with the lb config command. I have essentially stuck with what was in the Esnix script right from the word go. I've made one amendment only, and that is to this. That's this one, which is interactive shell. What that does towards the end of the build process, it allows me to interact with the build and to double check that all my directories have been created and my configuration files have been copied across. I then moved on to what Esnix calls phase 4, which is where he talks about, or where he lists all the different software that he wants installed. I left this pretty much default, except I also installed Chromium, the Materia GTK theme, and the Slick Greeter. So I just added that to the list. Okay, everything else is as default. From there, I opened a terminal, and let's just make this full screen. I went to root. I moved to my home directory. And what I want to run is this script, build Esnix 102. I kept my fingers crossed. I'll just use bash to run the script. And I'll hit enter, and I'll speed this section up until we get to the interactive element. Okay, well, rather than speeding it up, I decided to just pause it, as it takes quite a while. It took about half an hour to do the build before it gets to the interactive element. So we'll move on now it's got to that stage. So it's now got to the stage of allowing us to interact with the build. And you'll know it's got to this stage because it'll stop at a prompt that says live root at whatever your PC's name is, or whatever your PS1 prompt is. If I issue ls here, you will see the directory structure of the build environment. I have included this interactive element just so that I can check that so far the modified script has done what it needs to do. So for instance, from here I can cd into the etc lightdm directory, and I just wanted to check that it's included my lightdm.conf and my slickgreeter.conf. I could also cd into USR share backgrounds, so just to check that all of those backgrounds I copied across are there, which indeed they are. As you can see, background2.jpg is there, and OTB.jpg is there, as well as all of Esnix's wallpaper. Once you're happy that the script has moved everything across as it should, at this stage all you have to do is type exit, and it will carry on, and it will create your ISO. We'll come back in a second once it's completed that process. Right, so the script is finished, and you'll see here in my home directory, as well as the Esnix 102 directory, there's also another directory called Esnix OS 102. This is actually the build folder. And within that build folder, it's dropped an image called Live Image AMD 64 Hybrid ISO. Okay. So, first thing to do, let's test that in VirtualBox. VirtualBox is absolutely wonderful for this sort of testing. I've set it up as normal with 8 gig of RAM and a 32 gig virtual hard drive, and I've attached that ISO, the live image AMD 64 hybrid ISO. So let's start it and see what happens. Well, that's a good sign so far. The grub splash is there, and we have the options here to just run a live session or to actually do a graphical install. It doesn't have Calamaris, it just uses the Debian installer. So let's try the live system to start off with and to see what happens here. It seems to take a little while to boot, but I know, having done this on previous builds, that it does actually boot fine. So fingers crossed here while it's booting. It's established a connection. And there we go. It's picked up the wallpaper. So this is the live environment. If we go to settings on the live environment, you can see that if I go to appearance, for instance, it's applied the Materia Dark theme. It's also picked up, hopefully, the icons, the papyrus icons that I tend to use. In the home directory, pretty much what you'd expect, but if I go to view, show hidden folders, and I go into config.config, the dconf, the auto start, and the xfce 4 folders are the ones I copied across. So if I go into auto start, you should see that the Planck desktop file is already there. So all good. Is Planck running? I don't know. Let's have a look. Yes, it is. It's auto-started Planck. So we have the bare bones here of what I have on my desktop. The key, though, is will it install? Okay, it's now rebooting. And we get the same grub screen up, but this time I want to do an install. So let me hit the graphical installation, and it should just go straight into the Debian installer, which it has. You've all seen this before, so I'm not going to record this section. I'll do the installation and we'll come back and we'll see if the install system actually works. Right, so this is the moment of truth. I've called it OTB spin. Let's hit start and see if it boots. Okay. Well, first and foremost, my grub splash screen is there, which is great. I don't want to see the Plymouth splash. I just want to see a text startup. So hopefully that's all configured and working properly. We will see in a minute. I'm keeping my fingers crossed here. One of the things that I have found about this is it does seem to take a while to boot into the desktop. Not quite sure why, but it does eventually start to work. And there we go. And that's exactly what I want to see. I don't want to see Plymouth. Right, we've got to LightDM. It's got my LightDM file there, background. I set it up as OTB as the user, so let me log in. Now this is the stage that seems to take, I was going to say it takes a little while, but this one came up quite quickly. And there you have it. I wonder if I can make this full screen. It's not got the the guest editions installed, so I may need to just make a few tweaks here. So let me have a look. Display. What could I get it to? Let me think. Let's just go for 1680 by 1050. Oh. It doesn't want to do that for some reason. $1600 by 900. There we go. That'll do to start off with. Okay, so you're not seeing it full screen. I'd have to install the guest editions for that. But nevertheless, what I have is a custom distro that's installed. I could save that ISO image, put it on a USB stick, and I can install this on this system or a laptop or anything else for that matter. So that's how to create a custom distro with the Debian Live Build application and the script by Esnix with some modifications that I've applied. This is work in progress, people, so I'm not going to be putting this ISO up anywhere. What I will do, though, is I will stick my script or my version of Esnix's script into Google Drive and make it public if you want to download it and have a look. And I'll include a link in the, below this video in the information section. So, work in progress. It's not where I want it to be yet. I want it to be a Mate desktop, but I've had a great deal of fun getting to this stage, and I thought you might just be interested in seeing where I'm up to. If you want to follow along and do something similar, please read all of the documentation. Start off with looking at Esnix's videos, download his tar file, read the documents that he's kindly supplied, get your head round the process, and play away. We all like to tinker, and if you're at a loose end one Saturday, I can only say this provides hours of endless fun. So, I probably won't do something like this again for a while. I will do my normal videos, and I will probably produce, around the end of the year, one of my rambles. If you want to make sure that you get that, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. And I'll see you next time, everyone.